There was a time when this bridge terrified me. I remember crossing it as a child, looking down, feeling that vibration beneath the wheels, wondering how something so large could stay standing. Funny how things change. Because now, every time I cross it, I feel exactly the opposite. A sense that I'm arriving somewhere that matters. Not because it's perfect, not because it feels familiar, but because every important version of my life seems to lead back here somehow. A relationship, a dream, a decision, a new beginning. For reasons I still don't completely understand, Lisbon has always been waiting on the other side of the bridge. One of the things I love most about traveling is the small ritual of arriving. The moment where the suitcase is finally on the floor, the room becomes yours. And for a few days, life belongs to possibility rather than routine. There is always a question hanging in the air. Who will I be by the end of this trip? You never really know. A few hours earlier, I was somewhere else entirely. Different country, different concerns, different pace. And yet, some cities have the ability to shift something inside you almost immediately. Lisbon has always been one of those places for me. Not because of what there is to do, but because of who I become when I'm here. One of the strange things about growing older is that you slowly stop talking about your dreams. And not because they disappear, but because life becomes busy enough that forgetting them feels practical. Years ago, I thought I had left writing behind. It was something I used to do, and I used to love. Something I used to want. Then Lisbon happened, and somewhere between a relationship, a move to Berlin, and a forgot pen drive, I found the manuscript again. I still remember opening that file, reading words written by a younger version of myself, seeing ambitions I had almost convinced myself no longer mattered. The book wasn't finished, but neither was I when I was a teenager. And somehow, this city became part of the reason I started believing that again. There is something beautiful about being surrounded by books. Thousands of stories. Thousands of people searching for something. Can be knowledge, escape, inspiration, a different perspective. Maybe that's what travel really is too. A search for another perspective. Not necessarily about the world, but about ourselves. As I walk higher through the park, the city slowly reveals itself. The avenue, the river in the distance, and I find myself wondering how much of what I love belongs to Lisbon, and how much belongs to the person I became here. Because when I think about this city, I don't just remember places. I remember possibilities. The possibility of starting over. The possibility of becoming somebody new. The possibility that life can still surprise you, even when you think you've already figured it out. There is a reason I keep coming back, and it isn't nostalgia. At least not entirely. What draws me here isn't the past. It's the feeling that something could still happen. Lisbon always leaves the door open. And maybe that's why it feels different. For a long time, I thought adulthood was mostly about responsibility. But one of the things Lisbon taught me is that life isn't supposed to pause in between obligations. It happens in between them. This is what I missed. I missed the feeling. The feeling that life could happen after work. That a random Tuesday afternoon could become memory. That art wasn't reserved for special occasions. That curiosity had a place in everyday life. There was a period in my life when weekends meant discovering exhibitions, wandering through neighborhoods, listening to live music in parks, finding corners of the city I didn't know existed. And what mattered wasn't what we were doing, it was the feeling that life was being lived fully, that there was always something waiting around the next corner. The funny thing is that most of the places I remember from Lisbon aren't landmarks. They're moments, conversations, ideas, feelings. The city became a container for them, and every time I return, some of those memories quietly rise back to the surface. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about identity, about how much of who we are is discovered, and how much is simply recognized much later than it should have been. The older I get, the more I realize that understanding yourself isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process. Sometimes what feels like certainty turns into a question. Sometimes a question turns into an answer, and sometimes you find yourself looking back at your own life through a completely different lens. Maybe that's another reason I keep returning here. Because Lisbon has always been a place of recognition, a place where different parts of my life seem willing to sit at the same table. The person I was, the person I became, the person I'm still trying to understand. For me, this city has always existed somewhere in the middle, between countries, between chapters, between versions of myself. Perhaps that's why the bridge feels so important. Not because it connects two sides of a river, but because it reminds me that life is full of crossings. Some are physical, others happen quietly inside us. And every now and then, if we're lucky, we arrive somewhere that helps us understand the journey a little better. Some cities become destinations. Lisbon became the bridge.